That's right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Motion Design Hotline. Here we have more guests than usual, many more guests. All the guests are here. We've got the After Effects team hanging out with us here on the hotline. So thank you all for coming and hanging out. And thanks, of course, to you, good audience, for coming out and being with us during these times. I know we do this usually earlier, but this is when we're doing it. And as usual, joined by Kyle Hamrick here. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. This is a really exciting thing to have the team on here, and it's also just nice to see everybody because we didn't get to see them at NAB, which is kind of a thing that I really look forward to. So great that they could all join us, and I think this will be a really fun chat with everybody.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll kind of go around the horn, and if everyone could just, for those who do not know, right, who y'all are and what you do, it'd be good to give people a little bit of context. So, I don't know, Hollywood Squares style, I'm in the bottom corner, then Kyle, you're above me. So I guess we'll go, John, you're next. Why don't you go ahead, and then Tim, and then finally Victoria. So we'll do it up like that.
Alrighty. Well, super excited to be here. I'm John Columbo, and I'm a quality engineer on the After Effects team, which means I do a lot of testing, some help with design and implementing features, as well as customer outreach stuff like this and NAB, which I'm also missing this year. And previously, before joining the team, I was a motion designer and video editor myself, using Adobe tools for a very, very long time.
That's good. Very succinct. And then Tim, how about you?
Howdy, world. My name is Tim Carr Kowski. I am the product owner for After Effects, which means I'm part of the product management team with Victoria, Teresa, and other folks. And that means we look at what's going on in the world with After Effects. What do our customers need? How can we improve After Effects? What direction does it take? I've been on the After Effects team itself for, I'm sorry, I have to do math in my head at this point, 12 years, almost. And I've been at Adobe for closer to 15 or 18, depending on how you want to do contractor math.
Look, you can measure from wherever you'd like. We're not we're not here to impose our own measurement system. And last but not least, Victoria.
So hi everyone, I'm Victoria Nace, product manager for After Effects. I've been using After Effects since I was about 13 years old. It is sort of always been a part of my life. I was a motion designer for a long time before I joined Adobe, and I've been at Adobe about 4.5 years. And this is the fun part of my job, getting to hang out with you guys. So I also really missed NAB this year.
Well, it's always a chill hang. I mean, thanks to technology, we almost don't miss anything.
Evan, I actually have one more guest that's actually joining us today.
Oh, I could go get my glow cap. Mine's in the bathroom.
I literally ran upstairs about 30 seconds before the show started and grabbed that because I'd forgotten to.
Oh, actual cat.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
This is Ingrid.
That one's not glowing.
Show us pets.
Ingrid is excellent and visits a lot of meetings.
Yeah, she's a lap cat.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
Well, I was going to say, good people of the chat, if you have questions for the team, please get them at us, and we will collect them and disseminate them. We have some questions of our own, because we're excellent interviewers, I guess, and we're going to really nail that. But yeah, people of the chat, please get at us with all of your questions, and we'll try to filter them down and collect them so that none of them are missed. But there are a lot of people in here, more than usual. So we'll do our best. But yeah, Kyle, what's on your mind?
I think the first thing that might be good to talk about is just, obviously we have a couple of you here today of the, what is it, like 8,000 or 9,000 people that work on After Effects. I thought maybe it would just be good to take a second and talk about what the team is like, how many people it actually is. Adobe's a big company, but people may not realize how many people, are actually on the After Effects team. So whoever wants it, really.
I think any of us could take that one.
But as to the size of the team, I think actually we've lost a little bit. I've lost personally a track of the numbers. For years, we had about 20 core QE and developers, but we've actually grown a bit in recent years. And we've also gotten a bit larger in our management staff and also the number of designers we have on the team, which is awesome. We used to have one designer to our church for years and years and years. He's now in other projects. Now we've got James and Brian and Ramiz and their boss, Chris, all pitch in. So I don't know what the number really stands at. It's still less than 50.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 30 or 32, like core team members, maybe.
It's something around there. I usually think of it as about 36 people. There are not a lot of us. And yeah, Adobe's a big company. Adobe's 24,000 or something at this point.
Wow.
But I don't think any of us know what all those people do. We also do share a lot of technology. There's a lot of stuff that is... the way that I usually explain this is that every Creative Cloud app has pieces of the other apps in it. So like we use Photoshop as a library to open Photoshop files, and then Premiere uses After Effects as a library to open motion graphics templates. So there's a lot of shared code, and there's a lot of things that we can do because we're part of a bigger company. But the core team is really pretty small.
Yeah, you can get a sense of it a little bit if you open up the Secret Credits project. I mean, we credit the core team, but then portions of the other teams that also are working on the technologies that come into play.
Nice.
Well, I mean, what with it being secret? I'm sure many people have not opened it.
That's true.
Well,
Yeah.
so the Secret Credit project is accessed by holding Alt or Option, depending if you're on Mac or Win, and going to, let's see, on Mac it would be the After Effects menu about After Effects. I'm trying to remember. I haven't done it for a while. And then on Windows, it's under the Help menu, I think.
So everyone, go try it right now.
Yeah.
So-
maybe wait till we're done. I actually just saw a question pop up from Timo that is, which Dacia just answered. Hi, Dacia. Does the After Effects team work on Media Encoder, or is that the responsibility of the Premiere team, or are they their own whole team?
They actually are their own entire team. Years ago, actually, when there was some resource shuffling, I was loaned to the AME team as a quality engineer for most of 2 years, with my focus on getting AME as best as it possibly can be for After Effects. But they've taken it over. They have a fully staffed team. They do both AME and all of the formats work. So anytime, like a recent example is ProRes RAW. Anytime a manufacturer comes out with a new format that we want to be able to import into Premiere Pro, After Effects, Audition also shares the same importers, although usually they don't do much with the video. That's the team that does the work.
Nice. I'm on question duty for a second here, Evan. So if you want to
very well.
take whatever here.
So, as most people watching probably know, probably noticed updates to their softwares this week. Of that, there are a few new features that have come around. There are a few performance updates, a lot of stability things. Most notably, I guess, in terms of newness, what's new in the thing, I'd love to get a sense of sort of which new features are kind of exciting from the team perspective. I know Tapered Strokes is very big in a lot of people's minds right now, and so is the shape layer offset copies. So I'd love to hear from the team, some of what went into those, because there is kind of the sentiment from the world at large, like, oh, Tapered Strokes, here we are. It's probably been it's probably been showing up in your inbox a lot as a feature request. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the design thinking that went into this new feature that is now with us.
It's actually a little bit of an unusual story on that one, and it's not our normal development process. That is a feature we've wanted for years, and we know that tons and tons of users have wanted for years. And Jim Aquavella, who was on the After Effects team for a really long time and is now on the character animator team, went in one day and did it. And we didn't even know he was going to do it. And then suddenly we had Tapered Strokes, and it was amazing. And so went through some design revisions and user testing after that. But unlike most things where we have the roadmap and we take a look at what's possible and who's doing what and what our priorities are, that one almost came in through the side, but we're really happy to have it.
Interesting.
I think maybe that process in general, it's something that I know I've been curious about, and I'm sure a lot of people are. Just how maybe talk a little bit about like what that pipeline is. What's a good way for people to request things that they want in the program, or how you guys figure out what is appropriate to be working on, or things like that.
I'm just giving other people the option to talk
answer
here.
If no one else does.
Yeah. We should probably talk about user voice. And that's really the best way to send us feedback. There's actually two really good ways. User voice, when you're using After Effects and you go, man, I wish I could have something like Tapered Strokes. You go to help provide feedback. It'll take you to our user voice site. You can submit ideas, vote on other people's ideas, comment. But we also now have a public beta program. And that's a really great way to give us feedback, because not only do you get access to really our daily engineering builds, but you can try out things as they evolve, give us feedback, and really help change the direction of features. Tapered Strokes is a great example of that. It went through a lot of changes based on feedback from people who were trying it out in the public beta. And so you have access to features now before they're ready to ship, and can help guide their development in a way that was never previously possible. So John or Tim, you want to talk to that at all?
Well, it has been really exciting with the beta program. There's been a couple of instances where we've had a bug reported, either be a user voice or somebody emails us and says, hey, this is going on. And then literally within a couple of days, there's a back and forth. We send it through to the development engineers. They work on the fix. They get it checked in. It's pushed to the beta apps. And then the customer is able to test it out literally the next day. And then they can say, hey, it's working great. Or, oh, what about this? What about that? And then a revision is made, and then a day or two later, once again, there's a new beta version available that has that next change. So you're not waiting 6 months to see a bug fix. It's there within a few days sometimes. It doesn't happen every time, because it depends on what the scale of it is. But if it's something that can be done quickly, we are doing our best to get those things in super quick.
And one of the things that I'd like to point out is we've had a private beta program. We call it our pre-release program for decades at this point. The change to having public beta has not only been a change for us in who we deliver the betas to, it's how often we do it. We took a good hard look at the feedback cycle we were using with customers and said to ourselves, we need to get builds to them more frequently and get more people using them. So those were two of the big instigators for doing the public beta.
And just in case anyone hasn't looked at it yet, do they have to sign up for some like top secret list to get the public beta, or?
It's just in the Creative Cloud app. If you go into the app, you'll see there's a new section that says beta apps, and any of the video apps are now available in there.
I think Illustrator and Fresco might be too. I know Illustrator is for sure.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the video team at Adobe is After Effects, Premiere, Character Animator, Audition, Premiere Rush. I've left somebody out, Media Encoder. Oh, that's everybody. But that team, we worked very closely together. And so when we introduced the public beta for the video apps, some of the other apps went, ooh, can we have one of those?
Nice. I mean, I think it's good to see that Adobe is trying to be very open about getting that feedback, and obviously the more quality feedback that you all get, the better you can make the thing be what people want it to be, right? That's my assessment, my non-professional assessment of the situation.
Yep, and the wider range of testing we get too. It's not just about new features. It's also about just the infinite number of combinations of hardware people are using our tools on. We don't have every single one of those machines in the lab. And having a wider range of people testing things every day means we're going to uncover unusual combinations where there's an issue that we're not seeing ourselves. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of advantages in that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe you could speak to this a little bit, because I think a lot of you indicated you've been with Adobe since before the switch to kind of the software as a service model. Has that changed kind of product development, releases, and that kind of new features situation? Like going from something that is periodic to to something that is consistent. Like, how has that changed, I guess, the way you have to respond to things?
I may be the only one who's been around that long.
Oh, really?
I think you are.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Well, no, Michelle, you were through that too, but you're lurking behind the scenes.
Michelle's secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle is invisible. Michelle, the Michelle is Michelle Galena, who's kindly answering questions on the chat feed. She's our senior product marketing manager and has been a good friend of mine and the team for many years. When we switched to a subscription, the intent was for us to be able to sort of revolve on functionality and features more quickly. Mm-hmm. Before we did subscription, we had gone kind of this phase of releasing once every 2 years to once every year and a half to once every year. And then we started looking at, can we get that down even shorter? We started targeting releases both in the spring and the fall, so every 6 months. And it took us a while to sort of tighten up what that meant in terms of, we have this really big feature we want to release, something really cool like Warp Stabilizer or Content-Aware Fill. Those are going to take longer than 6 months to develop. So how do we plan those releases? How do we create a cadence where we're delivering something awesome for all of our users? More recently, we have begun shifting from sort of a 2 major release a year with some bug fixes in between to trying to get something out every month, so that we can get those bug fixes out more frequently. And if features are ready and we feel like we can present those, we can do that too. And a lot of that is in coordination with Michelle, who a big part of her job is helping us get the word out. We're all sitting under the hood of After Effects, tinkering and making really cool stuff. How do we let the world know about it? That's where Michelle and our marketing team comes in, and they do an awesome job of getting the word out through our website, through social media, and all the other channels.
Yeah, I think right around that time, the changeover to Creative Cloud was when I met some of the people on the team at the very first After Effects World Conference. And it was probably Amir that I heard some of this from, but I think I remember him seeming really excited about it. And this was something that I tried to relay to other people. Like, as the people that were actually developing the program, you could concentrate on the things that both you'd been wanting to do and that people had been asking for to make people happier versus trying to move boxes of software. So it kind of like allowed a different focus from, a development standpoint that seemed like a thing that the team was happy about, at least. So I don't know.
I'd say that's really true, that there's a big shift there. And I came into Adobe after that transition, but it does seem like that's something that, just anecdotally, it very much was the case. And it's a different thing when you're something that somebody's thinking about every month rather than one big investment at a time. Do I upgrade? And in fact, I was a motion designer when that change came through. And it meant that I could have the latest and greatest instead of every couple years begging for a couple $1,000s to upgrade my software. Mm-hmm. It was much, much easier because I worked at a company where I was staffed, but I was paid out of project budgets. And we could ask clients for 2 months of Creative Cloud in a way that you could never ask them to pay for your entire upgrade. Mm-hmm. So that actually worked out really well for me as a user in terms of being able to upgrade. But anecdotally, it has let us really focus on things like performance, which is our top focus now and the area where we're putting a ton of effort. And that's something that's a little bit of a harder sell when you're trying to get big flashy feature and lights. So the stuff that actually matters to you day to day.
I wonder if maybe that is a good lead into the way that you folks answer requests sometimes. I find really interesting as someone who's not a software developer, but someone says to you, make it faster. And I've seen this many times, especially on like the motion design Slack and stuff. Your response to that is usually a series of questions because it's not as simple as that usually, right?
Look, Victoria, you are muted.
John, you look like you want to jump in on this one.
Oh, I've seen a lot of those requests too. I know Tim has answered a lot of them as well, because we think about performance a lot of different ways, but I mean, are people asking, well, I want it to be faster when I'm changing things, when I'm moving things around on a single frame, or do you want it to be faster when you hit render at the end and are trying to send things out to clients? Because those are very different things.
Yeah, we've been saying for a while there's 3 kinds of performance, and you've hit 2 of them. There's interactive performance. While you're working, is it faster? Is the app responding when you click something? Do you get feedback? Then there's final rendering performance. But then there's a third one, which is actually how fast can you work? And that's where things like content-aware fill come in. Even though that doesn't seem like a performance feature, it's something that if suddenly you can do in 10 or 20 minutes what took you 2 days before, that's a massive speed up. And so we try to balance all 3 of those, actually.
Cool. Let's see. What's a good thing to hop to here? There are a lot of questions today, so it's a lot to keep up with, for sure.
Well, that's true. I mean, we're not quite at the halfway point. It's usually when we pivot to live questions. But
it's true.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple things here in my own list. I don't know. Why not? So obviously, there are times where things aren't perfect, or, things where, like you said earlier, you're trying to make a thing for around the world for a ton of different hardware configurations and things like that. And that's probably just the nature of software design. I assume that every once in a while things aren't going to be perfect for everyone. I don't know if maybe like the recent media encoder issue that some people were seeing, which is now fixed. I don't know, maybe that's a good opportunity to kind of discuss that process a little bit more, of like getting feedback from people and why it's important to actually understand what's happening to the users so that you can figure out why to do something about it, right?
See, I remember when that issue was first reported. I think it was shortly after 1706 was released last month. And I think we worked with probably 5 or 6 customers who reported it really quickly and said, hey, can you send us your log files? Which, by the way, when you do reports on user voice, if you go to help create logging files, experience the issue you're experiencing, whatever it is. In this case, send something to AME, or use, it was like the camera tracker on a pre-comp or something like that. And then after you do that, go again to help reveal logging files, and then you'll be shown the folder where all your logs are. And we had customers send us those files, and it really quickly showed which effects were causing the problem, and that way we were able to get it to the engineers and say, hey, this is what's going on, and we're able to get a fix into the beta program probably within like 5 days or 6 days, something like that. It was really quick. Mm-hmm. But that feedback was critical for us to figure out, well, how many people are experiencing this? What kind of priority should we put on it? And kind of the more people are reporting these things and the more information we have, the better we can make that decision of how quickly we need to push this out.
Cool.
I think a really important piece of that there is you have to tell us if something's broken. We've had really terrible bugs that no one ever reported. And when we fixed them, someone went, oh, thank you. It's been annoying me so much. And it's like, we didn't know. And if we don't know, we can't prioritize it. We have to know what's bothering you. You have to tell us. And as much as I read social media and read people's conversations and what they're talking about, it's a lot easier for me to point to a post on user voice or a direct bug report to us with details of what were you doing when something broke. That makes a huge difference, because we need to be able to reproduce something in the lab and fix it. But if we don't know it's broken, we're not going to be able to fix it.
Yeah, I'll say that anecdotally, I get a lot of strange questions from folks who are trying to do something from a design perspective and something's not working well. Getting people to articulate, how it's not working, or there's a consistent disconnect between the nomenclature that 2 sets of people could be using to describe a problem, right? That's a hard bridge to get over in any engagement, right? It doesn't matter what context it is. It's a hard gap to get over. So, hopefully from this, good users, please submit more logs if we could ask for anything. But that's an interesting kind of community empowerment, right? Because if everyone is sending the things, then it will improve for everyone who's using the things. You know, we would hope. It's the idea. But I don't know. Should we?
Well, I think I have a good pivot into that section of the show.
Okay, hold on. Viewers, rewind those things I said and pretend it's a natural segue into what Kyle's saying.
Yes,
okay.
This is the most natural of segues. So, just maybe we'll be less official for a minute here. Just for each of you, maybe what's one of your favorite features that either you were instrumental in helping push through, or just something that you're really glad exists now? I'm just going to fill every silence with GlowCat.
Yeah.
What's GlowCat's favorite feature?
What is GlowCat's favorite feature?
It's there is a feature that never got a real name that stuck, and we ended up naming it with a very long acronym of GlowCat, which is the ability to, let me see if I can remember what GlowCat stood for. Get layer output without creating another thing.
Uh-huh.
The ability to, and that's actually a really good feature.
It is. It's a really good feature, and it's a story that I meant to tell. It would be better if one of you was telling it, but I think it's a great anecdote that I've told before about watching that development process happen, because someone made a comment at an after-hours gathering at a conference. I think this was Matt Law, I believe, made a comment about, oh, it's a drag having to pre-comp things because of XYZ. And I think Amir was like, how would that work? And it became a conversation, and then over the next months or whatever, eventually someone got in touch with me and was like, hey, here's that thing that got talked about. Like, what do you think? Does this make sense? Is this an appropriate name for it? Things like that. And watching a feature develop like that and be put into there just based off a comment like, oh, that is a good idea. We'll work on that. I don't know. It was just a really cool, like, kind of behind the curtain experience for how some of that works. I don't know if that's a question, so.
Statement.
Maybe kind of the flip side of that. What is like one of the biggest challenges? Obviously, if it's something that you haven't solved yet, maybe you can't talk about it. But maybe something that turned out to be harder than it was thought, and you would have had it in there 3 years earlier, or I don't know.
I'd say the hardest thing is just that we can't do everything. And we have an incredibly diverse user base. People use After Effects in all kinds of ways you'd never imagine. There's some really, truly surprising uses out there. And given that, everybody has their own feature requests. Everybody has their own top thing that would be a total life-changing feature for them. But it's usually a different thing. And so one of the hardest things is figuring out what's going to benefit the biggest audience.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a good follow-up to that is we did have a question from Joel. What's the weirdest feature request you ever received?
I actually have one here that wasn't for After Effects. I got a request for someone for Prelude. He was working a big festival concert, and said, can I lock the ingest options on Prelude because all of my cameramen are drunk and they keep messing them up?
That's actually a pretty useful feature.
Yeah, and so obviously you made that happen the next day, right?
I passed that one along to the Prelude team.
I would say,
a follow-up. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say maybe not weird, but I mean, I've lost count of the number of feature requests we've gotten for existing features.
True. I want to wrap back to the. Ooh, hold on, my cat is biting me. What's wrong, Ingrid? I'll wrap back to your original question, Kyle, about favorite features, because I want to pitch for this one because it's only in the beta right now. And that is when you go to draw a new mask or a new shape. In the beta version, the cursor will display a little icon next to it of either a star if you're drawing a shape, or what did we land on for the mask? Was it like a...
It's a little mask box with the dot in the middle.
Yeah, a little mask box. And that is something that that's a mistake I make all the time. And I know lots of people make that sort of mistake all the time too, is you want to draw a mask or you want to draw a shape, but you haven't selected the layer. So you end up drawing the wrong thing. You're like, don't undo, go back, get the selection right, and do it again. So the story behind this was not necessarily just the frustration I had. It was for a couple of years, standing in the back of the classroom at Max, and Kyle, you've been there with me, and watching students take the lessons, and when they get to the stage of needing to draw a mask or a shape, not all of them had been perfectly following along, and they'd misclicked somewhere, and they have this problem. And so I'm like, there's got to be some way we can give some feedback about that, so we aren't running up and down the aisles in the classroom and saying, no, undo that, click there. So I'm really happy to have gotten that in, and I'd love it if everyone would try it out in the beta, tell us what you think, and give us feedback about it. In the beta, there's also the little box up in the corner that says what's new. There's also a button for provide feedback. So we'd love to hear what you think about that.
That's a great example of the seemingly very little quality of life improvements that I think a lot of people don't think about. And as someone that's been using the program for a very long time, it's often hard to think about what it's like to use it for the first time and all the things that we've learned to totally take for granted, and it's just how it works. But yeah, figuring out what things are intuitive or maybe need some work to be more intuitive for newer users or people coming from different backgrounds or whatever, which I'm sure is a thing that you're always constantly trying to figure out.
We think about that a lot. We really do. And especially almost nobody comes to After Effects new to Creative Cloud. They're usually coming from either the Photoshop or Illustrator side. They're often graphic designers who want to make their work move, or they're video editors who want to start adding motion graphics and visual effects to their projects. And I think John went the video editor route. And I had started in Photoshop, and so you see that even on the team we have that split. But that means that everybody comes in with a different set of knowledge. An editor might already be comfortable with keyframes. That might be totally new to a graphic designer, whereas a lot of the design aspects of it, graphic designers super familiar with. And so what someone needs to learn when they're just starting out is hugely variable.
Yeah, I've been kind of using my 10-year-old son as a little bit of a case study, I guess, because I've been teaching him After Effects, and kind of the way that he, discovers things or isn't able to discover things. I'm kind of making note of okay, that could use some work at least for people who are brand new to the application.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting watching kids use computers in general. Another good analog is a mouse, which if you watch a little kid use a tablet, you're like, oh yeah, well that obviously makes way more sense than having this thing over here that moves the cursor. And
yep, my 3-year-old son, my younger son, he's fascinated by the trackpad with the mouse on screen. He thinks that's like magic because he's doing something here and it's happening up here. But a touchscreen to him is that's normal.
Pierre asked, I assume he's referring to your son. Did he sign an NDA?
Oh no, he was using the release version.
As you know, children cannot be trusted with secrets.
Right.
Yeah, you probably can't legally sign an NDA until you're 18 anyway, right? That wouldn't really make.
Yeah, probably not.
Let's see. Okay, so this pivots well into something I was kind of had in my list here. Okay. So we got a question from Bear Studios. Hi, Sam. What are some of the most exciting features being worked on at the moment for After Effects that you can let us know about? Obviously, a big caveat at the end there, but
yeah, and that's a really big caveat. And there's actually reasons why our roadmap's not public, and it has to do with being a publicly traded company. There's legal reasons we can't tell you everything we're working on. I wish we could. And public beta actually gives us a lot more openness there, which is really nice. But our top priority, like we said it earlier, it's performance, and it is public news that we are working on multi-frame rendering. So we can tell you that's something that is very, very hot right now in terms of team energy. But there's some other really exciting stuff coming too. But priority one, make it faster.
Nice. We've got a question here about Lucas and from Lucas. And this is a question that I've heard the answer to before, but I think is good to get out there. And the question's kind of what do you think about having so many scripts and third-party tools and stuff like that, I've heard some people say, well, it's sucks that After Effects needs all this third-party stuff to function. That maybe goes really nicely to what you're saying before. People use this in so many different ways, but what's kind of the opinion about all the stuff that you can add to it?
The ecosystem, if you will.
Who wants to take that one?
No one wants it.
I'm kind of looking
Glowcat's taking
Yeah.
it in 3, 2.
I'm happy to take that. I was looking at John though, because I think he's the one of us writing the most scripts today. But it's
Well, most of my scripts now are automation stuff. I actually was just working on some stuff to try and make sure our AME stuff is working, because that's a good thing to make sure is working. And I wanted to say thank you to Joel. I saw that he had asked if my son was writing scripts as useful as some of my old ones, which is a very high compliment. Thank you. I think that we actually, Tim mentioned Brian earlier, who's one of our newer designers, and he did an awesome presentation just kind of when he first joined the team of like, hey, here's my experience using After Effects. And he made a really good distinction of some things that, like, you have After Effects as a platform where you do have these really specific workflows that, the team in general should be focusing on the things we're focusing on, like making it faster. Like a third-party plugin can't make After Effects itself faster. You can do things like Render Garden can do, where you're, spawning multiple command line renderers and things like that, but it doesn't actually speed up the app itself. That only the team can do that, so that's what we're focusing on. And we want After Effects to be a platform that people can build on for those specific workflows. That said, we are definitely aware that there's some things that over time have become really critical for people, and those are the things that people are saying, at least from what I see on Twitter, that people are saying, well, this should be part of the app because this is critical to my workflow. And, most people say it's everyone's, but, it's not necessarily everyone's. You'd be surprised. I know I was surprised, when I tell people like, oh, there's this script and that script, and people are just using vanilla After Effects because that's all they really know. I would say that we are looking at those things. We don't necessarily want to try and replace every single one of those things. But, there are times when we look at what After Effects is doing and say, okay, we need this feature. A good example of that is the expression editor. Going from a plain text on a white background to a fully featured with syntax highlighting and autocomplete and all that stuff, that was a huge upgrade. But we're aware that there were third-party scripts and extensions that were filling that gap before that people probably are not needing as much now. And that's just kind of the evolution of the product, that we're going to be constantly looking at what the customers are asking for and putting that, into our roadmap and seeing what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's a comment that just came in from Bear Studios that I think kind of is a really good dovetail on that. Would we ever implement Duick into After Effects to make After Effects sort of a character animation app? And I think that is a really good case of when we consider where we're going to have the team spend their time, how many customers are we going to address? Character animation in general is broadly used, and it's useful to get good animation tools in there, but Duick goes really, really deep. How much of that do we need to build into After Effects to make it useful for the broadest number of customers, or is that something that is better developed by a specialized team, whether it be Duick or Adobe's character animator team or another outside team, another application even?
And I'll point out, that for that specific example, I've lost count of the number of times I've seen people say, they use Duick, but have never used 90% of it. Mm-hmm. So if we were to, bring all that in, per se, then we would need to support 100% of it, even though people are not even using 90% of it, admittedly, right now.
Well, it's really that 80-20 rule, right? As seems to pervade all human endeavors, right? that 80% of your whatever comes from only 80% of the outputs come from 20% of the inputs. We're only touching so much. I know a lot of people, as you said, they come to this from trying to make previously created artwork move, or their editors, and now they're here in After Effects. You know, it's a lot to keep all the people happy. Hey, speaking of, we got a bunch of questions from the audience here. Let's what do you say we dive into some of these? Some of them are very specific.
Okay. Some of them are.
And some of them we, for example, may not even be able to solve, even with the collective power of all the intelligence on this call. But we're gonna see what we can do. I don't know, Kyle.
You pick one. What jumps out at you?
Well, I want to just try to start at the top of the list, and I'll work my way down.
Okay.
Tristan Summers submitted via our form, the form in which we ask people to send questions in before the show. They have frames. I'll just read it verbatim. Ghost frames from a project history are stuck in the cache, so they can't display the current state. However, deleting their cache or like purging their cache, and even importing this old project into a new project doesn't fix it. Any tips? So I don't want to spend too many, because you could really go down the rabbit hole with this. You know, what are you doing? What's in the project? Is this stuff stuck in your GPU? Is this a third-party plugin? You know, what is happening? But doctors, any thoughts of a prognosis?
I'd say one place to start here is something we introduced fairly recently, which is the System Compatibility Report. It's a little dialogue that pops up when you launch the app, and it'll tell you if you're on unsupported GPU drivers and things like that, which are often a source of those kinds of issues. And it'll actually point you to drivers that should work, and you can upgrade there. That's actually really reduced the number of those kinds of issues we've been hearing about, just because there's tons and tons of people who end up on unsupported drivers. That's a very common cause of that kind of thing.
That's right, folks. Update your drivers.
I know when I'm answering questions, that's usually the first thing that I ask people, like, are your drivers updated? Because that solves it more often than not.
Well, I asked you to take a meeting on Monday, and you told me to update my drivers, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's not always perfect, but, you know, I do what I can.
Well, it's the first auto response on your Gmail, so it's important. I don't know. Any other thoughts from the rest of the team on that, though? I don't know.
I mean,
got another question lined up. What's that?
I mean, I think that the GPU drivers is a really good call out. They said they already tried deleting the cache. I mean, there's what it kind of gets into what we mentioned earlier about like the specific terms. So when they say a ghost frame, do they mean it's like it's completely stuck? Kind of shows sometimes, but not there to move to a different frame. Like there's a lot of variation, I guess, in there, and it's probably the quality engineer in me talking. That's like, what are these specific steps that get you to this problem?
Right. I mean, we're assuming they're seeing a thing on the screen that logically they don't want to see, you know. But if this were a ticket, right, you'd want to know, well, what has the frame been cached in the RAM? Is that little green bar staying green? Is it turning blue? Is it clear? What's the deal down there? So
yeah, is your disk cache on? Are you have you gone in and manually tried cleaning out the disk cache if you're using it? Lots of different options in there.
Look, there's too many caches, and we just can't get to them all. Awesome.
A good example too of like, specific information is obviously important so that you can figure out how to fix it, because it could be several different things and you need to narrow down which one. Troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, Kyle, what else can you pull from the list here?
So we got a couple questions that are kind of about maybe different approaches to compositing software or animation software or new technologies like Unreal Engine, and, asking if, is that a thing that can be within AE? So obviously, to some degree, it's built the way it's built, and, there are limits on what it can become, but I assume you guys are probably always looking at new stuff that comes out and what people are using now, what people are going to be using in the future, and where to take things.
I guess the big question is as we see things like Unreal and we see a demand for things that are almost real time, is that the direction that we're going? Will we eventually see an After Effects that can do live output? I guess is probably one of the dreams of clearly a segment of people.
I think what we can say here, and again, this gets into we can't talk about our roadmap. issue, and that's always frustrating with these kind of conversations. But I guess the thing we could say is that we're seeing the same things, and anything is possible. It's just a matter of priorities and what's most important. And so we need to hear from you what's most critical, and that's certainly an area that is worth paying attention to.
Yeah. In general, the idea of what makes real-time technologies possible versus how does After Effects work. After Effects is designed in a specific way. It's engineered for a specific set of results. The way I've always put it is After Effects is all the pixels all the time, or at least all the pixels that you request. Game engines make significant compromises, even with very fast GPUs, to trim down how much they're rendering, what are they rendering, what are their capabilities of rendering. The places where you get big slowdowns in After Effects are the types of places where game engines really actually can't go, because After Effects is doing very complex renders under the hood and pushing out all of these pixels at once. Game engines make very different choices on how to do that. Now, would it be possible to squish those two concepts together? Sure, but it would definitely change some decisions about how we work things in After Effects.
Yeah, and one of the assumptions that we make in addition to all the pixels all the time is it's the same pixels all the time from machine to machine. And that if you open a project in After Effects on your hardware, it looks the same when you hand it off to your collaborator who's working on a different machine with different manufacturer's GPU. Maybe you've gone Mac to Windows. We try to make sure that your project is your project no matter where you are, no matter what machine you're on. And that is actually another area that is really challenging with those kinds of trade-offs. It means that we can't take advantage of technology that's only on one platform, only with one manufacturer, because we need to serve a really broad audience. So all the pixels and the same pixels, but also we need to make it faster. And so that's the calculation we're trying to make. and it's not an easy one.
As Pierre just pointed out in the chat, does Unreal 5 have tapered strokes?
It does not. I didn't see a single tapered stroke in that demo. Not one.
I mean, they probably have them, and it's made up of a million triangles. So
yeah, it's a billion triangles.
There you go.
The one tapered stroke is a billion triangles.
This is maybe a little bit related. We got a question from Timo about the question of unifying similar tools across other Adobe products, which I assume is also a thing that you're always kind of trying to figure out. Obviously, a lot of these, well, maybe not obviously, a lot of people probably don't realize that a lot of these were originally developed by, other companies that maybe were then purchased by Adobe over the years.
Including
so it's
After
probably
Effects.
Interesting figuring out how to balance that stuff.
It's also about balancing different user priorities. Our users have a different set of needs with those tools from someone in another app. And a good example of even just a simple one is Command D is duplicate in After Effects, but it's not in Photoshop. And it actually seems like the more logical keyboard shortcut for that. So should we change to match Photoshop because Photoshop is bigger, but we'd make it harder for somebody who's coming from elsewhere? It's challenging. We have a lot of those discussions, and there are people within Adobe whose role is to try to make things as consistent as possible. Particularly our design org has a design system they've put together that all the apps are sort of working toward, but we're all coming from a different starting point. And so it's a piece at a time, trying to bring things closer together. But we do have some people hard at work on that.
And at a certain point, I'm sure, P for the pen tool makes a ton of sense in Illustrator, but that's like a crucial hotkey in After Effects for position already. And changing that would probably make a lot of people very mad, even though it makes some people very happy.
Are you referring to the Pen tool?
Yeah, the pen tool.
Well, the G is silent. All right, what else do we have on the list? I know we've only got you on here for about another 10 minutes or so, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's wrapping up.
Let's see. What do you have a burning question, Evan, that you've been just aching for?
That's always sticking in my craw. Well, we've been asking don't think about it right now. I want you to put this in the back burner of your mind. On every show, whenever we have guests, we ask them to nominate one effect to our tournament bracket of effects at the end of the year. Well, at the end of the season. So just currently, while you're thinking about stuff, think about what your favorite effect is, which one you want to nominate to the bracket. We'll get into that later. But for now, I'd love to get into a little bit more process if we can. We've got some people were playing a little bit of bingo in here, seeing what things were going to be asked in the chat. And I think we covered it. You talked about multi-frame. Someone is asking, when will multi-threading be back? Is that a similar concept between multi-frame and multi-threading?
Yeah, it's the same idea. It's just a little bit clearer what we're talking about. Rendering multiple frames. And what's not coming back is the old render multiple frames simultaneously functionality, which under the hood was really inefficient. It was spinning up a whole copy of After Effects on every core, and we'd like to do things much more efficiently than that. But I can't tell you when because, again, we're not allowed to talk about our roadmap. But we're hard at work on it now.
Remain hopeful. Experts are on the case.
Stay tuned. Yeah. It's a big undertaking. It's been a big undertaking for a long time, but stay tuned.
Yeah. And let's see.
Technically, I feel like per Zach's question at the beginning of the chat, asking for a feature that's been in AE for 10 years, which it's kind of, I feel like we get a point for that. And detailing a highly specific bug report, I get a point for that. So 2 points for Zach.
Right. Okay, good. Zach's got 2 points today.
Yep. So Joel had a question about is Jdi still a thing? Probably a term most people are not familiar with, but I've heard thrown around at conferences and stuff sometimes.
It is to an extent. Jdi stands for Just Do It. So this is one of those quality of life things. Many years ago, one of our lead engineers, John Nelson, who's actually now on a research team, he's responsible for bringing content-aware fill into After Effects. He just had an idea of there's lots of little features that customers are requesting that we kind of weren't getting into our process. So what if we just set aside a day every now and then to just do it, to just take one of these little features and squeeze them into After Effects? So we've done that a number of times over the years, the small quality of life things. The last ones that we worked on were, I think it was December. It's actually December is starting to seem far away, but that was our it's kind of morphed into something we call Innovation Week, which is a regular thing we do across the company. And that's where the shape cursors that are in the beta build came from. So I got together with our designer, Brian, and one of our engineers, Jason, and we worked through the implications and the design to start getting that out.
It's also where master properties came from. That's the biggest thing that's come out of that. One of our engineers, Chris, saw the Essential Graphics panel and thought about, well, what would be Mogerts in After Effects? What would it be like if you could use this panel as a way to navigate and modify your compositions and create multiple instances of them the same way you reuse a template in Premiere? And he mocked up the first version of master properties in a week. It then took quite a lot more development to get out the door, but he finished that week with a proof of concept. So there's the Jdi Day, which is smaller features and tiny quality of life improvements, but then Innovation Week is sort of that on a larger scale.
I think another small feature
because I love master properties.
Another small feature that came out of that is the ability to enable and disable all the expressions on your selected layers. So you go to the layer menu. That was something another one of our developers, Victor and Victoria, worked on a Jdi Day a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. What's still in the chat? What have we not gotten to?
Joel loves master properties too.
That's true.
I respect.
Let's see. Viewer in the chat, SXXOV question or check mark. Hard name to say, but they would like to know what is the difference between a Creative Cloud crash and a crash in progress. I don't know. I don't know what those are and what's so different about them. I don't know that either. Is there a difference? I think this goes back to our bug report problem, but man, I don't know. We're gonna get a lot of stuff.
I'm not entirely sure how to interpret that myself, honestly.
Me neither.
Yeah, I might need to see what those dialogue boxes look like.
Yeah.
We should have asked people to send pictures.
You do not want pictures in a YouTube chat pod.
Oh, no.
Well, look, we're all trying to innovate in the space.
Are we?
No. Speaking of not innovating, Kyle, we've arrived kind of at the end of the show because we only got 5 minutes. So, again, like I said, I would love to know before we bail out of here, what effects will you nominate to our end of year bracket?
And should we clarify, is this like favorite or like what you think is objectively the best?
Look, yes, it's the one you think will. Don't nominate something you don't think will win the bracket. No one. Look, you can love the Browns as much as you want. Don't nominate them to the bracket because you know they won't win.
I also feel like we should probably tell people in the chat to nominate some as well. I personally have not been keeping track of these. Evan has, so I have no idea how many we have. And since the end of the season is next Friday, we probably need more. I don't know.
Well, look, everybody gets to nominate one, and then we make them fight each other.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Kyle, you and I will be doing the deciding, so it's going to be an incredibly subjective trip. So, but yeah, I don't know. Tim's looking very pensive. John,
do we
you seem
to nominate, or do we have to agree on one?
No. Each of you gets one.
Oh.
Is Fast Box Blur in the bracket yet?
I don't think it matters if it's in there twice. It would just fight from two different positions. We really haven't done any of the logistics of how this works.
It affects the seeding, Kyle.
Gosh, I keep seeing set mat over and over again in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's got to be in there already. I mean,
That's got to be in there.
I think
Venetian blinds is on the board here. Nice.
I'm trying to think something that's a little less used or underused, like a little under the radar. Oh, you know what's one that is super powerful and nobody uses is Paint Bucket.
Paint?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bucket.
You know,
Bucket
if
is
you would have
underrated.
asked me what your thing was going to be, it would have been that.
You can do so many things with it, and people don't know that it's there.
Yeah. It's like the magic wand tool from Photoshop, but for video. Kind of.
Kind of.
Plus other stuff that it can do.
I think that was the best infomercial read we've had all season. So
You too can use the paint bucket tool, only the Creative Cloud price that you're already paying.
Oh man, I see Patrick Butler's calling out ball action, which I didn't even realize was 3D camera aware.
Yeah.
You can do so much with that.
You can do some really cool stuff with that.
Why didn't we just do an hour of making people say effects that they like, and then we riff on that? Maybe that's next week.
That might be the finale.
yeah, I mean, we all have other things to do.
For sheer versatility, I would maybe go with an expression control, but they certainly aren't very exciting as effects.
They aren't.
Yeah.
John, did we get an actual nomination from you?
I mean, I'm going to go with SetMat. I know it's probably in there already, but I mean, I use that so often.
Mm-hmm.
Crowd favorite.
That's a pretty close to the top seed, I bet.
We shall see. And finally, I mean, Victoria, we put down Paint Bucket for you. Unless you want to change, it's totally fine.
Let's go with that.
Okay. And Tim, which will you be putting on our list?
I'm torn between Fast Box Blur, which I think is underused, and Key Cleaner, which is just awesome.
You know what? I'm going to write down both, and we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what we do on the day.
There's the stuff that's just magic, like camera shake deblur, that is pretty darn cool.
Well, gosh, even the 3D camera tracker, like, I mean, there's so much you can do with that. I mean, it's not just for tracking cameras, but you can track things in the scene too. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I mean, since we have unveiled none of the criteria by which we'll be judging the things, it's very hard to say which will be victorious. So it's hard to know. But we're here at the end of the show. I want to thank you all for coming and hanging out and for spending this time with us, for demystifying some of the process, giving us a little peek behind the curtain, as much as we can without legal repercussions, which is great. And yeah, it's just so wonderful. I know that we couldn't meet in person, but this is almost the same. Not quite. not even. But anyway,
there's no secret pizza here, but we do have some glow cats. So
Yep.
I mean, that's something.
They're important.
And some real cats. So thank you to our guests. Thank you to everyone who was hanging out in the chat. Hopefully we were able to answer as many questions of yours as we could. Hang out with us next week, in which Kyle and I will be wrapping up the season, I guess. And, that'll be that. I suppose that's about it. Usually we ask people to plug something, but I don't think there's that much to get into this time. So continue getting on user voice. Continue submitting your bugs. When things crash, do submit.
And join the beta.
And join the beta, yeah.
Join the beta. And that's pretty much it. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks for being on here. It was awesome.
I have to go try to press that out button. I did it.